The galaxy had rules. Old rules. Strong rules. One of them was simple. Some species were not to be trusted. Humans were one of them. For centuries, their names sat untouched in sealed archives, buried under warning symbols and red markers. Emotionally unstable, excessively aggressive, prone to escalation, too dangerous for galactic unity. So the galaxy moved on without them. And now, the galaxy was dying. Entire star systems vanished overnight. No explosions, no debris, just silence. Where light once burned, there was nothing. Sensors failed. Long-range scans returned empty space where planets used to be. The threat called itself nothing. Others named it the quiet void. Fleets were sent. They never came back. The Galactic Council chamber filled with panic it had not felt in 1,000 cycles. Representatives from hundreds of species spoke at once. Some demanded retreat. Some demanded surrender. Most had no ideas left. This was not a war. This was erased. A final decision was made. A distress signal, coded, ancient, and desperate, would be sent to every known civilization still alive. The signal went out. Minutes passed. Then hours. Refusals came first. We cannot help. We must protect our own. We are already lost. Some species never answered at all. Their worlds are likely already gone. As the replies faded, silence returned to the chamber. The kind of silence that felt like a closing door. Then a junior archivist spoke. There was hesitation in their voice. There is one more entry. The council turned. A species listed as inactive. No diplomatic ties. No active channels. Last contact, centuries ago. The name appeared above the chamber floor. Humans. The reaction was immediate. No, that file is sealed. They were banned. They cannot be controlled. Older council members remembered the reports. Human fleets that fought even when victory was impossible. Human commanders who sacrificed entire armadas to save strangers. Human soldiers who refused to surrender, even when surrounded. They won battles they should have lost. And when they lost, they took enemies with them. The galaxy did not understand that kind of thinking. It feared it. That region of space is unstable, one member argued. They fight among themselves. Another voice, quieter, colder, replied. So do we. The difference is they survive it. The room fell still. The enemy was advancing. Another system would be erased within hours, maybe minutes. The unthinkable choice was made. The human channel was opened. The distress signal was sent. Not a demand. Not a command. A plea. Then nothing happened. No confirmation. No rejection. Just empty space. Time passed too slowly. Some members said it was a foolish hope. Others said humans were probably already extinct. A few whispered that maybe humans simply did not care. Then, a single signal broke through the static. It did not come from Earth. It did not come from any known human authority. The source was unknown. Mobile. Moving fast. The message contained no greeting. No symbols of peace. Only text. We saw your signal. The chamber froze. More text followed. You didn't call us when things were calm. You didn't call us when you had fleets. You waited until dark. The council tried to respond. No channel opened. The message continued. That means you're not asking for help. You're asking for the ones you were afraid of. Long-range sensors suddenly screamed warnings. Dozens. Then hundreds. Mass signatures exiting hyperspace at the edge of known territory. The shapes were wrong. Not sleek. Not uniform. Every ship looked different. Scarred hulls. Exposed armor. Heavy weapons welded onto frames never meant to carry them. These were not Navy ships. They were survivors. Some bore human markings scratched over older symbols. Others carried no flags at all. Many showed signs of previous catastrophic damage. Patched, rebuilt, kept alive by force of will. The fleet did not slow down. They did not request clearance. They headed straight toward the war zone. The final message arrived. Short, cold, certain. Only the angry humans showed up. As the transmission ended, the lights in the council chamber dimmed. Outside, space itself seemed to hold its breath. And somewhere beyond the stars, the enemy was about to learn what the galaxy had tried to forget. The human fleet did not announce itself again. It moved like a storm with no center, ships drifting slightly out of formation, each vessel carrying its own history of damage and survival. To the Galactic Council, it looked chaotic. To military minds, it looked wrong. No standard command structure was visible. No clear flagship. No shared design language. Yet every ship adjusted speed together. Every vector shift happened at the same time, as if they shared a single instinct. The council watched in silence. This was not how a rescue force behaved. A senior tactician broke the quiet. These are not official human forces. That much was obvious. The hull markings were inconsistent. Some ships carried ancient human symbols no longer used. Others showed emblems that had never appeared in any galactic database. Many had names burned directly into metal, uneven and crude. Names of places. Names of people. Names scratched over old scorch marks. These ships were never meant to fight together, another analyst said. Some of them were built centuries apart. And yet, they were here. Together. A request for identification was sent. No reply came. Instead, a single human ship detached from the fleet and moved forward alone. Its hull was heavily scarred, one engine burning hotter than the others to compensate for damage. It did not slow as it approached the Council's defensive perimeter. Weapon systems across the station locked on instinct. The ship stopped just outside firing range. A channel opened. There was no uniform, no flag behind the speaker. Just a human figure, older than expected, face lined and tired, eyes sharp with something the translators struggled to define. Not hatred, not madness. Purpose. "We are not here to join your alliance," the human said calmly. "We are not here to take orders." The council demanded clarification. The human leaned forward slightly. "You sent a signal," they said. "We answered it. That is all." The council attempted diplomacy. Gratitude. Apologies. Carefully chosen words about past misunderstandings. The human interrupted. "You don't need to explain," they said. "You were afraid of us. You had reasons." That was worse somehow. One council member asked the question everyone feared. "Who exactly are you?" The human paused, then answered, "We are the ones you didn't want." Silence followed. Galactic historians were brought in. Old records reopened. Files once sealed by unanimous vote were projected across the chamber. Humanity, long before isolation, had not been united. There were factions, colonies that failed, wars fought far from any council oversight, places where law collapsed and survival became the only rule. Those humans did not disappear. They adapted. Some became mercenaries. Some became pirates. Some became defenders of forgotten systems no one else cared to protect. Others simply learned how to live in constant danger. They were labeled unstable, unpredictable, and then, quietly, cut off. Trade stopped. Diplomatic channels closed. Navigation beacons were removed. Humanity was allowed to exist, but only in isolation. Most humans accepted it. Some did not. Those humans left. They took broken ships, stolen ships, ships no one would miss. And they kept going. Now, they have come back. The council asked why these humans answered the signal when no one else did. The human commander's expression did not change. Because the signal was honest, they said. You didn't ask for heroes. You asked for help when you were out of options. They gestured toward the stars. That's when people like us are useful. Before the council could respond, alarms flared. The quiet void was moving again. Not toward a defended system. Not toward a military target. Toward a refugee corridor. Millions of civilians were evacuating through unstable jump routes. Their escorts were light. Their defenses are minimal. The enemy had learned. Panic spread across the chamber. Orders were shouted. Fleets were scrambled, but they were too far away. The human commander did not wait. They cut the channel. The lone ship accelerated, engines screaming as it rejoined the larger fleet. No discussion followed. No confirmation pings. The entire human force changed course as one. They jumped directly into the refugee corridor. Observers expected disaster. No fleet had ever engaged the quiet void at close range and survived. The humans did not slow. They emerged inside the corridor, between the civilians and the approaching darkness. The enemy did not attack immediately. It studied them. Human ships moved forward, placing themselves deliberately in exposed positions. They spread out, forming a loose barrier of steel and firepower. The first enemy strike came without warning. Space twisted. A human cruiser vanished mid-maneuver, erased so completely that its absence hurt to look at. The council waited for retreat. It did not come. Instead, the remaining human ships surged forward. Weapons fired that violated multiple treaties at once. Kinetic rounds at impossible speeds. Energy beams tuned to unstable frequencies. Missiles that detonated in patterns no other species used because the risk was too high. Human ships took hits. They kept moving. One vessel lost half its hull and continued firing with the remaining guns. Another rammed directly into a distortion field, collapsing it at the cost of its own existence. The refugee ships escaped. All of them. When the corridor cleared, only wreckage and silence remained. Half the human fleet was gone. The council prepared condolences. Then sensors picked up movement. Human ships, damaged but operational, regrouped. They did not celebrate. They did not acknowledge losses. They simply reformed and awaited the next threat. A message came through. "We will hold the line," the human commander said. "But understand this." The council listened. "We fight differently," the human continued. "We don't expect to come back from every battle." That unsettled even veteran war leaders. "Why accept that?" one asked. The human's answer was quiet. "Because if we don't, someone else won't come back at all." Data analysts began reviewing the battle. The quiet void had retreated again. Not randomly. Cautiously. It had adjusted its approach vectors. Increased distance. Changed attack patterns. It was learning. And for the first time, its learning curve showed hesitation. A xenopsychologist spoke a single sentence that chilled the chamber. "The enemy is no longer treating this as erasure," they said. "It is treating this as resistance." The council looked at the human fleet, damaged, outnumbered, refusing rest. And a terrifying thought took shape. These were not the strongest humans. They were not the most advanced. They were simply the ones willing to answer a call no one else would. If this was what humanity's outcasts could do, what had the galaxy been afraid of all along? As the human fleet turned back toward the darkness, engines glowing with strain, one final human transmission echoed through the chamber. Not a threat, not a promise, a warning. "We're angry," the voice said, "but we're not your enemy." And the galaxy realized it no longer knew which truth was more dangerous. The quiet void did not retreat far. It lingered beyond sensor range, watching, measuring, adjusting. The Galactic Council believed the brief pause meant the enemy was regrouping, preparing a stronger strike. Every simulation said the same thing. When the quiet void returned, it would erase the human fleet completely. The humans seemed to expect this. They did not pursue it. They did not fortify. They did something far more disturbing. They spread out. Instead of forming a tight defensive wall like every other species would, the human ships drifted apart, leaving wide gaps between them. Some vessels powered down non-essential systems. Others rerouted energy away from shields and into weapons. To alien commanders, it looked like exhaustion, like desperation. To the humans, it was preparation. A council observer finally asked the question no one else wanted to voice. Why are they weakening their own defenses? No one answered. Then the darkness moved. The quiet void did not arrive as a fleet. It never did. It arrived as a distortion, a wrongness in space that bent light and crushed instruments. Reality folded inward as if space itself was being deleted. This time, it did not attack the civilians. It went straight for the humans. The first strike shattered a human destroyer at extreme range. The ship vanished without warning, erased so cleanly that even debris failed to exist. The second strike took another vessel seconds later. Alien commanders waited for the human fleet to break. Instead, something unexpected happened. The humans advanced. They accelerated directly into the distortion, weapons blazing, engines pushed far beyond safety limits. Warning alarms filled the council chamber as human reactor signatures spiked into the red. "They're committing suicide," one strategist whispered. But the humans kept going. As the distortion expanded, human ships did not attempt to outrun it. They cut their engines at the last possible moment and fired, point blank, into the heart of the anomaly. Weapons that should not have functioned at that range tore into unstable space. Kinetic rounds slammed into nothing and somehow found resistance. Energy beams carved glowing scars across empty darkness. And for the first time, the quiet void reacted. Not by erasing, by recoiling. Space rippled outward violently, throwing human ships in all directions. Several lost control, hulls torn open by forces no known physics could explain. But the distortion shrank. Just slightly. The council froze. That was not possible. The quiet void had never been pushed back by force. Entire civilizations had thrown their strongest weapons at it. Nothing had slowed it. Nothing had marked it. Yet now, there were readings, damage patterns, fluctuations. Human ships regrouped with brutal efficiency. Damaged vessels were pulled behind others without request. Ships with failing reactors moved to the front. A council officer realized the pattern and felt cold. "They're rotating casualties," they said quietly. "They're choosing who takes the next hit." The humans were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to learn. Each attack tested a different weapon, a different range, a different energy signature. Each loss was measured, recorded, and immediately analyzed by the remaining ships. The quiet void struck again, harder this time. 3 human cruisers disappeared in rapid succession. The humans answered by changing tactics instantly. They stopped firing heavy weapons. Instead, they launched thousands of small objects, debris, wreckage, even pieces of their own destroyed ships, flung into the distortion at high speed. Most vanished. Some did not. Sensors detected brief moments of resistance, flickers where space pushed back. Human targeting systems locked onto those flickers and fired. The quiet void shuddered. Across the council chamber, alarms screamed as the distortion destabilized, collapsing inward on itself before expanding again in a different configuration. It was adapting. So were the humans. A xenophysicist spoke in disbelief. "They're mapping it. In real time." The realization hit like a shockwave. Humans were not trying to overpower the enemy. They were forcing it to reveal itself. The battle dragged on, minute after minute. Each exchange cost the humans ships, lives, entire crews lost without recovery. And still, the fleet pressed forward. At last, the quiet void changed strategy. Instead of attacking the ships, it targeted space behind them, cutting off retreat, isolating human vessels in pockets of collapsing reality. The council expected panic. What they saw instead was coordination. Human ships trapped behind the distortions did not signal for help. They did not attempt to escape. They turned inward. Each isolated group accelerated straight into the heart of the anomaly surrounding them. Alien observers watched, horrified, as multiple human ships vanished together. Then something impossible happened. The distortion destabilized violently, collapsing under its own pressure. Space snapped back into place with explosive force, throwing surviving human ships clear. The quiet void pulled away. Not far, but enough. The battlefield fell silent. Of the original human fleet, less than half remained. Many ships were crippled. Power levels are critical, hulls barely holding together. And yet, the humans did not withdraw. They held positions. The council opened a channel, urgency breaking centuries of political restraint. "You must retreat," a representative said. "You've done enough. We can regroup." The human commander cut them off. "No," they said simply. A pause. "We're not done yet." The council demanded an explanation. The human commander's voice remained steady, but there was something beneath it now. Not anger. Focus. "We learned something," they said. "It can hurt. Not easily. Not safely. But consistently." They brought up sensor data, patterns emerging from chaos. Weak points. Timing windows measured in fractions of seconds. The data was incomplete, because it had been paid for in life. A council member asked the question that haunted the room. "How many more of you are you willing to lose?" The human commander did not hesitate. "As many as it takes," they said, "but fewer than you would." That truth settled heavily. The quiet void remained at the edge of detection, no longer advancing, no longer confident. It had encountered something it did not expect. A species willing to die, not to win, but to understand. As emergency repair drones swarmed the surviving human ships, one final report reached the council. Enemy behavior analysis complete. For the first time since its emergence, the quiet void had altered long-term strategy. Its new priority classification appeared on the display. Primary threat, humanity. The chamber fell silent. Because if the enemy now saw humans as the greatest danger, then the galaxy had not called them too late. It had called them just in time. And the humans, angry, broken, and unyielding, were only getting started. The human fleet remained where it was. Wrecked ships drifted slowly, their hulls torn and scorched, emergency lights flickering like dying stars. Power signatures were low. Ammunition counts were worse. Life support failures were spreading ship by ship. Any other species would have withdrawn. The humans did not. Instead, something far more unsettling began. They reorganized. Damaged ships were clustered around those still capable of shielding. Reactors were cross-linked through unstable power bridges. Crews were transferred through open space in armored suits, moving calmly between vessels while enemy distortion still pulsed at the edge of sensors. They acted as if time was not their enemy. The Galactic Council watched in uneasy silence. A senior medical observer finally spoke. They are ignoring casualty thresholds. Their survival models make no sense. That was true. Human loss projections had passed acceptable limits several times over. By every known doctrine, the humans should have disengaged after the first major exchange. Instead, they were preparing for another. The Council demanded an explanation. The human commander answered without emotion. "You measure war by what you can afford to lose," they said. "We measure it by what happens if we don't act." That answer disturbed the chamber more than any casualty report. The Council requested access to human battle data. The humans agreed. What the analysts found was worse than expected. Human combat logic did not prioritize ship survival. It prioritized information density. Every engagement was treated as an experiment. Every loss fed a growing predictive model that updated faster than alien systems could process. Human ships were not fighting independently. They were nodes in a living system. One analyst summarized it quietly. They are turning themselves into sensors. That realization hit hard. The humans were not reckless. They were deliberate. The quiet void had never faced an enemy that learned this fast, at this cost, and without hesitation. As repairs continued, a council envoy attempted a different approach. They asked the human commander why these humans had come, when others had not. The commander paused longer this time. "Because we know what it's like," they said finally. To be ignored. To be written off as too broken to matter. To scream into the dark and hear nothing back. That struck something deep in the chamber. Many species present had once been small, once dismissed, once vulnerable, but they had survived by becoming careful. Humans had survived by becoming dangerous. The quiet void moved again, not forward, sideways. It shifted toward a cluster of industrial systems, factories, shipyards, supply hubs, worlds with little defense, but massive logistical value. A strategic move. The Council panicked. Without those systems, the war would be lost within weeks. Orders were prepared. Fleets scrambled. Evacuations planned. The humans acted first. They split their remaining forces. The Council objected immediately. Dividing weakened fleets was a known fatal error. The human commander responded with a single sentence. "It expects us to defend like you." Half the human fleet accelerated toward the threatened systems. The other half did something inexplicable. They powered down. Weapons offline. Shields lowered. Engine idling. They drifted, silent, in open space. Alien observers stared in disbelief. "What are they doing?" someone whispered. Then the quiet void struck. It surged toward the powerless human ships, distortion expanding rapidly, sensing easy erasure. At the last possible moment, the human ships ignited everything at once. Reactors overloaded. Engines flared beyond redline. Weapons fired in patterns never used before. The ships did not dodge. They collided. Human vessels plunged directly into the distortion, detonating their reactors inside it. One by one. Not randomly. Sequentially. The quiet void convulsed violently. The distortion twisted inward, collapsing on itself as human ships vanished in controlled detonations that destabilized its structure from within. The Council screamed orders that no one heard. Then the sensors stabilized. The quiet void recoiled, hard. It did not simply retreat. It fled. For the first time in the war, it abandoned a target completely. Silence followed. The cost was horrifying. Only a handful of ships from that half of the fleet remained. The Council prepared emergency transmissions, condemnations, apologies, praise, horror. The surviving human ships sent a single report. "Test confirmed," the commander said. "Self-sustaining distortion fields can be collapsed through sequential internal overloads." A pause. "But the margin is thin." That was an understatement. The Council demanded to know why the humans would attempt something so extreme without consultation. The commander answered softly. "Because if we waited, you'd talk yourselves out of it." That was also true. The galaxy had survived for millennia by avoiding risks. Humans survived by choosing them. As the remaining human ships regrouped, a troubling pattern emerged. Enemy behavior analysis showed increased avoidance. Longer pauses between movements. Indirect approaches. The quiet void was no longer acting like an unstoppable force. It was acting like a wounded predator. And wounded predators were dangerous. The council convened an emergency session. The conclusion was grim. Human tactics worked, but they were unsustainable. At this rate, the humans would run out of ships long before the enemy was destroyed. Someone said what no one else wanted to. They will burn themselves out. The human commander heard the statement through an open channel. They did not deny it. That was always going to happen, they replied. The council asked why. Then, the humans continued. The commander's voice carried something new. Not anger. Acceptance. Because we don't need to survive the war, they said. We need to change how it's fought. That sentence changed everything. The humans were not trying to win alone. They were rewriting the rules so others could. Data packages began streaming from human systems to the council. Weapon calibration. Distortion response timing. Sacrifice thresholds quantified into usable doctrine. The galaxy began to learn, because humans had paid the price first. A junior strategist whispered, "They're teaching us how to fight by showing us how they die." No one corrected them. As the human fleet prepared to move again, the council realized the truth. These were not heroes. They were not saviors. They were a warning given form. And somewhere in the darkness, the quiet void was learning a different lesson. Humans did not retreat when afraid. They advanced. And if the galaxy could not learn to fight like them, then it would not survive what came next. The galaxy noticed the change before it understood it. Trade lanes once abandoned began to open again, not because they were safe, but because the enemy was no longer everywhere at once. The quiet void had slowed. Its movements, once relentless and direct, now showed hesitation. That hesitation had a cost. Where it paused, the galaxy breathed. Where it hesitated, civilizations survived. And every pause pointed to the same cause. The humans. The Galactic Council reviewed the latest long-range projections in silence. The enemy's expansion curve, once a straight line toward total collapse, had bent. Not stopped. Not reversed. Bent. The models could not explain it. But the battlefield data could. Every time the quiet void encountered human forces, its behavior changed afterward. Attack angles shifted. Distortion fields formed farther away. Entire sectors were avoided for no clear strategic reason. A senior analyst finally said it aloud. It's avoiding them. The word felt unreal. The quiet void had erased species older than human history. It had consumed technologies the council barely understood. It had never avoided anything. Until now. The explanation was brutal in its simplicity. Humans heard it. Not enough to destroy it. Not enough to defeat it. But enough that contact now carried risk. And risk was something the quiet void had never accounted for. The humans, meanwhile, were paying the price. Their fleet was a shadow of what it had been. Replacement ships arrived, but they were worse. Older hulls dragged from forgotten docks, civilian frames reinforced with military weapons, vessels held together by necessity and stubbornness. Human reinforcements did not arrive in clean formations. They arrived alone, or in pairs, or in battered groups that had clearly fought their way through hostile space to get there. Each one joined without ceremony. No speeches, no promotions, no expectation of survival. The council asked where these ships came from. The human commander answered honestly, "Anywhere we can still fly from." That answer unsettled everyone. It became clear that these humans were not backed by an empire, not by a unified government, not even by a single word. They were backed by choice. Every ship that arrived had chosen to come. That made them impossible to predict and impossible to deter. The quiet void struck again, but differently this time. It did not attack a system. It attacked a human assembly point. The distortion appeared without warning, directly inside a region crowded with damaged human ships undergoing repair. The council watched in horror. There was no time to form defenses. No time to evacuate. The humans were vulnerable. The quiet void surged forward. And then it stopped. Not because it was blocked. Because the humans didn't run. Ships too damaged to fight powered their reactors anyway. Crews stayed aboard vessels that could barely move. Weapon systems fired even as hulls collapsed. The humans formed a wall of wreckage and fire. They knew they would not hold. They held anyway. As ship after ship vanished, something else happened, something no analyst had predicted. Human ships began broadcasting. Not commands. Not threats. Data. Every second of sensor input, every fluctuation in the distortion, every micro-response of the enemy was transmitted across all channels, unfiltered and unrestricted. The data flooded the Council's systems. Then the humans did something unthinkable. They invited other species to use it. A human message cut through the chaos. "Stop watching," the commander said. "Start firing." Alien fleets hesitated. The Council had never authorized such tactics. The risk was enormous. The losses would be severe. But the data was clear. For the first time, there were targeting solutions that worked. Alien ships opened fire. Together. Different weapons. Different doctrines. But all guided by human-fed targeting windows measured in fractions of a heartbeat. The quiet void reeled. Not retreated. Reeled. Its distortion field fractured under simultaneous pressure from multiple species attacking in ways they had never attempted before. The cost was high. Alien ships were lost. Human ships were erased entirely. But something fundamental changed. The quiet void broke contact. It did not just withdraw. It jumped, a behavior never before recorded. The Council chamber erupted. Not in celebration. In fear. Because now, the enemy was no longer acting like a force of nature. It was acting like a thinking opponent under stress. The battlefield fell silent again. The human assembly point was gone. In its place drifted debris, radiation, and the remains of a fleet that had chosen to die standing. The Council prepared another declaration of mourning. Then sensors detected movement. A handful of human ships, barely operational, were pulling themselves together. The human commander's ship was among them. Hull breached. Power unstable. Life support running on emergency reserves. The Council demanded an immediate retreat. Medical evacuation. Full withdrawal. The commander refused. "We're close," they said. The Council demanded clarification. "Close to what?" someone asked. The commander's reply carried exhaustion and something else. Certainty. Close to making it afraid of losing. That sentence echoed through the chamber. Fear had always belonged to the galaxy. To the smaller species. The weaker fleets. The ones who ran. The quiet void had never feared loss. It was erased because it did not need to be preserved. Humans were changing that equation. Every engagement now cost the enemy something measurable: time, stability, predictability. The quiet void could still win. But now, winning would hurt. The Council realized the danger too late. This was no longer a war of survival. It was becoming a war of endurance. And in wars of endurance, humans were terrifying. A xenopsychologist reviewed the data and reached a conclusion that chilled everyone who heard it. The quiet void is beginning to treat humans the way it treats natural disasters, they said. Not as enemies, but as forces to be avoided. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. Because natural disasters reshape everything around them. As the human fleet prepared for its next move, the commander sent one final transmission, not to the Council, but to every allied fleet. "We're not special," the message said. "We just didn't stop when it hurt." Then, quieter. "Now you know how." The channel closed. The humans turned back toward the dark. And for the first time since the war began, the galaxy understood the truth. The quiet void was not unstoppable. But stopping it would require becoming something the galaxy had spent centuries trying not to be. And the humans, angry, bleeding, and burning, were already there. The human fleet did not celebrate the change in momentum. They could feel it in their bones. This was the dangerous part. When an enemy that never feared loss began to calculate it, the war entered a new phase. Not louder, not faster, sharper. The quiet void stopped reacting. Instead, it was planned. Long-range sensors across the galaxy began reporting the same thing. Silence where there should have been pressure. Entire regions went untouched. Systems the enemy could have erased were ignored. At first, the Council thought it was a mistake. Then the pattern emerged. The quiet void was circling. Not around the world. Around humans. Everywhere humans gathered in force, the enemy stayed distant. Everywhere humans were absent, the darkness crept closer. The implication was horrifying. It was isolating them. A senior strategist said it out loud. It's separating the humans from everyone else. The room went cold. The Council realized the trap too late. If the humans stayed concentrated, the rest of the galaxy would be eaten. If the humans spread out, they would be erased one group at a time. Either way, humanity would be bled dry. The Council called for an emergency summit with the human commander. The human ship arrived slowly, engines strained, hull scarred beyond recognition. The commander appeared on screen, posture steady despite the visible damage around them. The council laid out the projections, the trap, the math. They asked the question carefully. What do we do if you are the target? The commander listened without interruption, then nodded once. That makes sense, they said. The council waited. We were always going to be, the human continued. You don't ignore a fire once it burns you. A council member demanded to know if the humans could survive what was coming. The commander answered honestly. No. That word hit harder than any battle report. But the commander was not finished. We can slow it, they said. We can hurt it. And we can choose where it has to face us. The council realized the shift immediately. This was not about defending worlds anymore. This was about positioning sacrifice. The humans proposed a plan. They would split completely, not into fleets, into single ships and small groups, scattered across critical junctions in space, places the quiet void would have to pass through to reach high-value systems. Each human presence would become a spike. Painful, costly, impossible to ignore. The council objected violently. This was not a strategy. This was executed by delay. The commander did not argue. We're already dead on the long timeline, they said calmly. This just decides what we die buying. The silence that followed was heavy, because the logic was flawless. The council asked the one remaining question. How long can you hold? The commander looked away for the first time, then back. Long enough, they said. If you don't waste it. The humans dispersed. There was no farewell ceremony, no final transmission. Ships simply peeled away from the main group and jumped alone into darkness. Some went to empty space. Some to unstable regions no one else dared enter. Some parked themselves directly in the path of advancing distortion. Each ship became a line, and each line began to break. The quiet void struck hard and fast. Human ships vanished daily, sometimes hourly, but every engagement cost the enemy time, stability, predictability. The humans did not always fire. Sometimes they simply forced the enemy to react, to reshape itself, to detour, to slow. Those seconds became minutes. Those minutes became survival. Alien fleets moved behind the human screen, fortifying worlds, evacuating populations, learning to use the data humans streamed until the moment they died. The council watched the casualty lists grow. Names without faces. Ships without return signals. And yet, something else was happening. The quiet void's expansion curve bent again. Not slightly. Sharply. The enemy was no longer advancing on a wide front. It was being funneled toward a region of space the humans had chosen. A dead zone. Sparse systems. Unstable physics. A killing ground. The council realized the truth with a mix of awe and horror. The humans were hurting it. Every sacrifice, every lost ship, every forced reaction pushed the enemy closer to a place where it would have to fight or stop. But hurting required pressure, and pressure required presence. The human numbers dwindled. Soon, there were not enough ships to cover every route. The council begged the remaining humans to pull back, to consolidate, to survive. The commander refused. If we pull back now, they said, it learns it can wait us out. The quiet void tested that theory. It paused completely. Days passed, then weeks. No attacks, no erasures. The galaxy dared to hope. The human commander did not. Don't relax, they warned. It's waiting for us to blink. The blink came from somewhere unexpected. A human outpost, small, isolated, already considered lost, stopped transmitting. The council assumed the worst. Then a message arrived. From the outpost. Weak. Fragmented. We're still here, the message said. It tried to go around us. Attached data showed something critical. The quiet void had attempted to bypass a human line and failed, not because it was blocked, but because bypassing increased its internal instability beyond safe thresholds. The enemy was trapped by its own adaptations. It could not advance freely. It could not ignore humans. And now, it could not avoid them entirely. The commander saw the data and made the final call. All remaining units, they transmitted. Collapse inward. It's time. Human ships converged toward the dead zone. What remained of them? The council understood what that meant. There would be no screen after this. No delay. This would be the end, one way or another. As the human fleet gathered for the last time, a council representative broke protocol. They spoke directly, without filters. You don't have to do this alone, they said. We can. The commander cut them off gently. You already are doing it with us, they replied. Because you learned. That was the difference. The galaxy was no longer watching humans die. It was fighting because they had. The quiet void surged toward the convergence point. It could not deter anymore. It could not wait. The line had broken, but it had broken inward, collapsing the enemy's options along with it. The final battle loomed. And the humans, those still alive, those already lost, had done what no fleet, no empire, no council ever had. They had forced the darkness to choose. And in doing so, they had turned fear into a weapon, one the galaxy now knew how to hold. The last human transmission before the convergence was simple. We're here, the commander said. And for the first time in the war, the quiet void answered. The convergence point had no name. It was a region of broken space the galaxy had never bothered to chart. Gravity twisted there. Time behaved inconsistently. Sensors lied more often than they told the truth. It was the perfect place for an ending. The remaining human ships arrived one by one. There were far fewer than anyone expected. What had once been a fleet was now a collection of survivors. Burned hulls, patched armor, reactors held together by emergency overrides and stubborn refusal to shut down. Some ships arrived without weapons, some without shields. Some are barely capable of movement. Every one of them arrived anyway. The Galactic Council watched from afar, their own fleets forming a distant perimeter. They were no longer helpless observers, but they also knew the truth. This fight would not be won by numbers. It would be decided by resolve. The quiet void approached slowly, not as a sudden wave, not as an overwhelming surge. It came carefully. The distortion spread and folded inward, shaping itself around the dead zone. Light bent unnaturally. Space screamed across sensor channels. It was thinking. The enemy had learned that rushing humans carried consequences. This time, it wanted certainty. The human commander watched the readings in silence. For the first time since the war began, they allowed themselves a moment. Not of fear, of memory. They remembered worlds no one talked about anymore. Colonies that failed. Wars that never made it into history records. Friends who had died believing no one would remember them. They were wrong. The galaxy is remembered now. The human commander opened a fleet-wide channel. Listen, they said. No dramatic speech followed. No heroic words. Some of us won't be seen again, they continued. Some of us already aren't. A pause. But this is where it stops. The ships acknowledged silently. No cheers. No hesitation. The quiet void struck. Not with erasure. With pressure. The distortion compressed, folding inward, crushing space itself toward the human formation. Ships groaned under forces far beyond structural limits. Hulls buckled. Power grids failed. The humans did not flee. They moved forward. Every ship accelerated into the compression zone. Engines flaring white-hot. Reactors pushed beyond safety thresholds that had already been ignored a dozen times before. The first human ship vanished. Then another. Then 3 more. The council felt each loss like a physical blow. And then something changed. The quiet void slowed. Not stopped. Slowed. The distortion thickened, struggling to maintain cohesion under the strain of internal instability. Human ships fired continuously, not aiming for destruction, but disruption, timing their attacks to moments of fluctuation measured in fractions of a second. The data streams were overwhelming. Alien fleets began firing too, guided by human targeting logic, using tactics once considered suicidal, accepting losses that would have been unthinkable months ago. The battlefield became chaotic. Ships from dozens of species fought together, overlapping fire, overlapping sacrifice. But the center belonged to the humans. Always. The quiet void attempted its final adaptation. Instead of pushing forward, it collapsed inward, trying to compress itself into a single, stable core beyond reach. The human commander saw it instantly. That's it, they said. The plan was activated. Human ships changed formation, forming a loose sphere around the collapsing distortion. Every remaining vessel locked onto the same coordinates. The council realized what the humans intended too late. They were not trying to destroy the enemy from the outside. They were going to lock it in place. The cost would be absolute. The commander gave the final order. Burn everything, they said. Human reactors went critical, not all at once, but in sequence, timed precisely to reinforce the distortion's instability without allowing it to escape. One by one, human ships overloaded. Each detonation was not an explosion, but a controlled release of energy tuned to the enemy's internal structure. The quiet void screamed, not in sound, in feedback. Space itself convulsed, tearing at the edges of the dead zone. The distortion faltered, compressed too tightly to flee, too unstable to hold form. The council shouted evacuation orders that no one followed. There was no evacuation from this. The human commander's ship was among the last. Hull breaches spread rapidly. Power flickered. Life support alarms blared unanswered. The commander opened a final channel. Not to the council, to the galaxy. "We were never your best," they said quietly. "We were never your safest choice." A pause. "But we were what you needed when it mattered." The distortion began to collapse completely. Reality folded inward, consuming the remaining human ships in a cascade of controlled annihilation. The commander's voice faded as the signal broke apart. "Don't waste this." Silence followed. Not the sudden silence of erasure. A deep, heavy silence. Sensors across the galaxy struggled to process what had happened. Then the readings stabilized. The distortion was gone. Not retreated. Not displaced. Gone. The quiet void ceased to exist. The dead zone remained, scarred, unstable, forever changed, but the enemy was no longer there. Across the galaxy, systems held their breath. Then stars continued to burn. Worlds still existed. The war was over. The council did not cheer. No one did. They searched desperately for any sign of human survival. There was none. No emergency signals. No debris fields. No escape vectors. Humanity, the angry humans, the forgotten ones, the ones who answered when no one else would, were gone. The council declared the humans extinct. Memorials were built on 1,000 worlds. Records were rewritten. The sealed archives were opened at last, not as warnings, but as history. Humanity was no longer listed as unstable. They were listed as decisive. Generations passed. The galaxy was rebuilt. Fleets patrolled space with doctrines born from human sacrifice. Civilians lived under stars that should have gone dark. And still, there was a quiet unease. Because something felt unfinished. Then, decades later, at the edge of the dead zone, a sensor buoy registered a signal. Weak. Fragmented. Humans. The council dismissed it as interference. Then it repeated, and repeated again. A ship emerged slowly from warped space. Small. Damaged. Ancient by modern standards. Its hull carried human markings, burned and faded. Power output barely registered. No weapons online. But it was alive. The council stared in disbelief as the ship transmitted a single message. Did it work? The galaxy did not know how to answer. Because the truth hit harder than any war. Humanity has not gone extinct. It had been reduced. And whatever survived the dead zone had seen something no one else had. The signal was cut out. The ship vanished back into unstable space before anyone could reach it. But the message remained. The humans were not gone. They were watching. And the galaxy, safe, rebuilt, and forever changed, understood the final lesson far too late. You do not measure humanity by how many survive. You measure it by what refuses to end. And whatever still existed beyond the dead zone. I was not angry anymore. It was patient. The galaxy tried to return to normal. That was the first mistake. In the centuries after the quiet void vanished, civilization rebuilt faster than anyone expected. Trade routes reopened. New alliances formed. Old rivalries softened under shared memory of survival. The war became history. And history, as it always does, began to lose its sharp edges. The humans were remembered as heroes, but distant ones. Almost mythic. Their sacrifices told in polished speeches and simplified lessons. Statues showed strong figures standing tall, not the exhausted survivors they truly were. Children learned a clean version of the story. Humanity stood against the dark. Humanity vanished. The galaxy was saved. It was comforting. It was wrong. At the edge of the dead zone, long-range sensors never stopped watching. The region remained unstable, warped by forces no one fully understood. Probes sent inside rarely returned, and those that did carried corrupted data and distorted timestamps. Official doctrine labeled it contained. Unofficially, every strategist knew the truth. It was unfinished. The first sign came quietly. A navigation buoy vanished. Not destroyed, not disabled, just gone. Its last transmission showed no distortion, no enemy presence, no anomaly spike. It simply stopped existing. The council investigated. The data was inconclusive. The incident was logged as a system fault. Then another buoy vanished. Then a listening station. Always near the dead zone. Always without warning. The pattern took decades to confirm. Something was moving inside the scar left by the quiet void. Not expanding. Not attacking. Observing. The council argued. Some believed it was residual instability. Others feared the enemy had not been fully destroyed, only scattered. A minority raised a third possibility. That something else had survived. That idea was dismissed publicly. Privately, it terrified them. Because if anything had lived through the collapse of the quiet void, it would not be the same as before. The first contact happened by accident. A deep space research vessel, civilian, lightly crewed, lost navigation control near the dead zone and drifted across the boundary before emergency drives could engage. The crew expected death. They found silence. Space inside the dead zone was wrong, but calmer than expected. Distortions lingered like scars, but they were stable, predictable. And then the ship detected another presence. A vessel, human in origin. The hull was unlike anything in the archives, part old design, part something new. Layers of reinforcement built over centuries. Power signatures are low but controlled. No weapons active. The human ship did not approach. It matched the course. Then transmitted. Turn back. The message was clear. Calm. Not hostile. The research crew complied instantly. As their ship retreated, they caught one last sensor image. There were more ships. Dozens. Then hundreds. Not forming a fleet. Forming a boundary. The council sealed the report. Too quickly. The galaxy did not learn from secrecy the first time. The second revelation was impossible to hide. A quiet void relic. Long thought inert. Reactivated near a core world. Distortion readings spiked. Panic spread instantly. Defense fleets mobilized. They were too slow. Before the distortion could fully form, space bent inward sharply, then collapsed. Not erased. Contained. Human ships emerged from hyperspace around the relic, surrounding it in perfect formation. Their movements were precise. Silent. Efficient. They dismantled the relic methodically, stripping it down and pulling it into the dead zone before anyone could intervene. The entire operation took less than 6 minutes. The council demanded answers. This time, the humans responded. A single figure appeared on screen. Older than expected. Scarred. Not angry. We told you not to come looking, the human said. The council struggled to speak. You survived, one member finally said. The human nodded slightly. Some of us did. The council demanded explanations. Accusations followed. Questions about sovereignty, about secrecy, about why humanity had not returned. The human let them finish. Then spoke. We didn't leave to punish you, they said. We left because someone had to stay where it ended. The truth unfolded slowly. When the quiet void collapsed, it did not simply vanish. Its core fractured, scattering fragments of itself across unstable space. Dangerous, dormant, waiting. The dead zone was not empty. It was a containment field held together by human presence and constant vigilance. Human survivors had adapted to that space. I learned to live inside broken physics. Learned how to track remnants of the enemy before they could reform. They had become something new. Not soldiers. Not citizens. Wardens. The council asked why they had not been told. The human answered without bitterness. You wouldn't have accepted the cost, they said. And you would have tried to take control. That was true. The council asked the final question. Are you still angry? The human paused. Then they shook their heads. No, they said. We're tired. Silence followed. Then the human delivered the warning that would echo through history. We won't always be here, they said. This work doesn't end. It just gets quieter. The council promised support. Resources. Relief rotations. Shared responsibility. The human declined. You already have your role, they said. Remember what happened. The channel closed. The human ships withdrew back into the dead zone, reforming their silent boundary. The galaxy never tried to cross it again. Instead, the lesson spread. Military doctrine changed. Sacrifice was no longer taboo. Risk was no longer avoided at all costs. Humanity's way of fighting, measured, painful, honest, became the foundation of galactic defense. But one rule stood above all others, carved into the charter of the council itself. Never isolate a species for being dangerous. Never ignore a warning because it is uncomfortable. And never wait until only the angry ones answer. Centuries later, children would still hear the story, not as a legend, as a reminder. Humanity did not save the galaxy because it was the strongest. It saved the galaxy because when everything else failed, it showed up anyway. And somewhere, beyond broken space and quiet stars, the Wardens watched. Not for glory, not for thanks, but because someone had to stand where the dark learned fear. And they would stand there, until they were no longer needed. And if that day ever came, the galaxy would be ready.